A cold November wind scraped along Willow Street as a thin girl dragged a squeaky cart full of cardboard down the cracked sidewalk. Her name was Tyla Carter, 10 years old, hungry and still smiling, like she didn't know the world had already given up on her. That smile was about to change everything. Before we dive in, drop a comment below. What would you do if you had just $1 left? Hold on to it or give it away. Stay tuned, because what this little girl does next will leave even a billionaire speechless. The morning sky hung low and gray over Seattle, the kind of sky that pressed on your chest. Tyla's jacket was too thin, her gloves frayed, but her eyes were bright, curious, searching. Beside her, her mother Nora pushed a strand of hair out of her tired face, the hospital badge on her coat still dangling from the night shift she hadn't quite recovered from. Every morning was the same ritual. Gather scraps, trade them in for a few dollars. Stretch those dollars into another day of rent, another lunch, another bit of hope. They reached the end of the block, where a man sat huddled on the sidewalk, his beard wild, his clothes layered like shields against the cold. His hands were cracked, his boots split open at the seams. He didn't raise a cup, didn't beg, just sat there with eyes so sharp they almost didn't belong to a man who'd lost everything. Tyla slowed the cart. The sound of metal wheels over pavement faded as her small hand tightened around the single crumpled dollar in her pocket. Her mother noticed and whispered, "Keep walking, honey." But Tyla hesitated. The man looked up, his voice low but clear. "Morning, miss." There was something strangely calm about him, like he was testing her without saying a word. Tyla glanced at her mother again, then took one step forward. "Are you hungry?" she asked. The man blinked, surprised. "I could use some breakfast." His voice carried a note of humility that felt real, not rehearsed. Without another thought, Tyla reached into her pocket and handed over the dollar. "It's all I've got," she said softly. "But you probably need it more." The man didn't take it right away. "Won't you need this for yourself?" he asked, his tone gentle but curious. Tyla shook her head. "My mom says we should help when we can. Even if it's small, it still counts." That simple line, delivered without hesitation, hit him harder than he expected. He accepted the dollar as if it were gold. "Thank you," he murmured. "You'd be surprised how rare that is." Nora placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, pride and worry tangled together, then guided her onward toward the recycling center. The girl's laughter floated behind them, a small sound against the wind. The man watched them go until they turned the corner. Then he slowly stood, his eyes following the path they'd taken. The moment they disappeared, his entire posture changed. The slouch straightened. The fatigue in his eyes was replaced by focused precision. He pulled a phone from inside his coat, sleek, expensive, and spoke quietly into it. "Cancel the meeting," he said. "I found something, or someone." His name was Adrian Miles, founder and CEO of Miles Industries, a man whose face had been on magazine covers and business networks across the country. For the last week, he'd been living on the streets testing what he called the empathy experiment, a personal project to understand what generosity looked like when money wasn't part of the equation. He had met hundreds of people. Some avoided him. Some tossed coins without a glance, most simply walked by. But this little girl, this stranger with nothing, had done what wealth had never bought him, reminded him what grace felt like. Back in his penthouse suite on the top floor of Miles Tower, the shower's steam washed away the grime of the streets, but not the memory of the girl's voice. Adrian stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, the crumpled dollar bill drying on the marble counter beside him. He could buy anything, cars, companies, countries even, but he couldn't buy what that child had shown him in 10 seconds on a freezing street. He stared out over the city, his reflection a blur against the skyline. For years, he'd believed success meant control, efficiency, measurable outcomes. But standing there barefoot, wrapped in silence, he realized the world he'd built was missing its simplest piece, human connection. He called his attorney, Julian Cross, and said quietly, "Find out who she is. The girl. I want to know everything." 2 days later, a file landed on his desk. Tyla Carter, age 10. Julian read, lives with her mother, Nora Carter. Father left 4 years ago. They're 2 months behind on rent at Brookview Apartments. Nora works double shifts at St. Clair Medical Center. No immediate family support. Adrian's jaw tightened. "A single $1, he whispered, staring at the photo clipped to the folder, a girl with windswept hair and bright, unguarded eyes. She gave me her only $1. Julian hesitated. "What would you like to do?" Adrian turned back toward the window, the $1 now pinned under a crystal paperweight. "I want to change her life," he said simply. "And maybe she'll change mine." Outside, the city hummed with routine indifference, unaware that one small act on a forgotten street had just altered the course of a billionaire's world. And that, viewers, is where our story truly begins, where a child's kindness meets power, and the result is something no one could predict. Tell me in the comments, have you ever given away something small that changed someone's life, or maybe your own? 2 days had passed since the morning on Willow Street, but the image of the little girl's hand offering that wrinkled $1 still haunted Adrian Miles. He had built an empire by predicting human behavior, what people wanted, what they feared, how far they'd go for comfort or pride. But Tyla Carter had rewritten every rule in a single moment. She hadn't hesitated, hadn't looked around to see if anyone was watching. She had simply given. That same quiet certainty was what brought Adrian in a navy suit and uncharacteristic humility to the worn hallway of the Brookview Apartments. His attorney, Julian Cross, followed, holding a folder, and wearing an expression that hovered between concern and curiosity. "Are you sure about this?" Julian asked. "People might misunderstand your intentions." Adrian paused outside a peeling door with the number 204 barely hanging from its screws. "I'm not doing this for them to understand," he said. "I'm doing it because it's right." Inside the apartment smelled faintly of detergent and strong coffee. Nora Carter opened the door cautiously, her nurse's uniform still on her eyes, wary. Behind her, Tyla sat at a small kitchen table bent over a schoolbook. For a brief second she froze, recognizing the tall man from the street, the one who had looked hungry, lost, almost invisible. Now he stood in her doorway, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine cover. "Mrs. Carter?" Julian began offering a business card. "My name is Julian Cross. This is Mr. Adrian Miles." Nora's brow furrowed. "The Adrian Miles?" she asked, almost whispering. The billionaire, Adrian, smiled faintly. "I suppose that's what the papers call me, but I'd rather you think of me as the man your daughter helped 2 days ago." Silence filled the room. Tyla looked up, her eyes widening. "That was you," she said. "You were pretending." Adrian nodded slowly. "Yes, I was trying to understand something about kindness, and your daughter showed me more than I expected." Nora folded her arms, torn between suspicion and disbelief. "You were out there on the street." By choice, Adrian's voice softened. "Sometimes you lose perspective when your world becomes too comfortable. I wanted to see how people treated someone with nothing. Most turned away. Your daughter didn't." Julian set the folder on the table. "Mr. Miles asked me to prepare something for you both. A trust fund for Tyla's education through college, and an offer for you, Mrs. Carter. The Miles Foundation is expanding our community health initiative. We'd like you to join the program's leadership team. Better hours, better pay, and resources to actually make a difference." Nora's breath caught. Her first instinct was to refuse, too good to be real, too sudden to trust. "Why us?" she asked quietly. "There are thousands of families struggling." Adrian met her eyes. "Because most of them didn't raise a child like Tyla. She gave me her last dollar not because she had much, but because she believed someone else might need it more." "That's something you taught her." Tyla fidgeted with the edge of her notebook, looking between them. "Does this mean I don't have to help Mom collect cardboard anymore?" she asked, half teasing, half hopeful. Nora smiled sadly. "We'll see, sweetheart." Adrian chuckled softly. "Let's just say you'll have other things to focus on, like school, and maybe a few new books to read." That night, after they left, Nora sat at the same table, staring at the papers Julian had left behind. The trust documentation, the offer letter, the foundation's proposal, it all seemed impossible. The same man who'd accepted $1 with shaking hands now offered her a future she'd only dreamed of. She whispered to herself, "If it's real, maybe it's a sign we've done something right." Across town, Adrian stood in his glass-walled office at Miles Tower. The city sparkled beneath him, but his gaze drifted to the crumpled dollar framed on his desk. He had collected rare art antique watches and signed contracts worth billions, yet none of it felt as valuable as that single bill. It reminded him of something his late wife once said: "Kindness doesn't need witnesses to matter." For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. The following week, Tyla walked through the gates of Ridgewood Academy. The red brick buildings and manicured lawns looked like another world compared to the cracked sidewalks of Willow Street. She clutched her new backpack with both hands, the tag from the scholarship tucked inside her name, printed in neat black letters, Miles Foundation Scholar. Nora walked beside her, dressed neatly in her new work clothes, the exhaustion in her face replaced by something rare calm. They stopped in front of the main building where a man waited at the steps. Adrian Miles, no longer in disguise, smiled as they approached. "Welcome to Ridgewood," he said. Tyla tilted her head, half shy, half curious. "You didn't have to come," she said. "You're busy." "I wanted to," he replied. "Some moments are worth being there for." He knelt slightly so his eyes were level with hers. "You nervous a little," she admitted. "Everyone here looks like they already belong." Adrian's smile softened. "You belong because you earned it. Tyla, don't forget that." Nora extended her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Miles, but I want to be clear, this isn't charity. If I'm joining your foundation, I'm doing it because I can work, not because you feel sorry for us. That's exactly why I asked you," he said simply. "You don't need anyone's pity, you need opportunity. And frankly, so does this foundation." Their exchange carried a quiet respect, one born not from wealth or gratitude, but shared understanding. Later that afternoon, Tyla sat in her first class surrounded by students in crisp uniforms, their laughter echoing through the halls. She stared out the window for a moment, thinking about Willow Street, about the cart, the cold, and the man who had seemed invisible. It all felt like a lifetime ago. She opened her notebook and began to write. One small act of kindness can change everything. At that exact moment, several miles away, Adrian watched the city lights flicker on from his office. For years, his foundation had written checks and hosted galas, yet none of it had moved him the way one child's simple generosity had. For the first time, his wealth had found direction. Julian entered quietly. "Everything's in motion," he said. "The Carters are settled. The trust is active, and the new community health program starts next month." Adrian nodded, still staring at the skyline. "Good," he murmured. "Let's make sure they never have to worry again." Julian hesitated, then asked, "You think that little girl realizes what she's done?" Adrian smiled faintly. "Not yet, but one day she will." Outside, the rain began to fall over Seattle again, washing the streets clean. Somewhere in that gray city, a 10-year-old girl had turned a simple act into a miracle, and a man who had everything discovered what it truly meant to give. The rain had turned steady by the time Ryan Carter found himself parked across from Ridgewood Academy. He hadn't planned on staying long, just enough to see if the stories were true. Through the iron gates, he spotted her immediately. Tyla, his daughter, dressed in a crisp blue uniform that looked too fine for the life she'd once lived. Her hair was neatly braided, her laughter free. She looked older than the 6-year-old he'd walked out on 4 years ago, and beside her, Nora steady radiant in a way that unsettled him. Life had gone on without him, and by the looks of it, it had gotten better. He leaned back in his seat smirking. Well, well, he muttered. Looks like my family's moving up in the world. He didn't know much yet, only rumors picked up through a friend of a friend, something about a billionaire, a scholarship, and a foundation job. To Ryan, it sounded like luck finally knocking on his door, even if it wasn't his name on the mailbox. That evening, as Tyla sat at the kitchen counter doing homework, Nora stirred soup on the stove, humming softly. Their new apartment at Crestview Heights was small, but warm walls painted fresh books lined neatly on a shelf. When the knock came, Nora assumed it was a neighbor. Instead, she froze the moment she saw who stood on the other side. "Hello, Nora." Her breath caught. "Ryan." He smiled like nothing had happened. "You look good. The new place suits you." She didn't open the door fully. "What do you want, just to talk?" he said, leaning casually against the frame. "You going to make me stand out here like a stranger?" "That's what you are," she replied. But Tyla's voice called from behind her. "Mom, who is it?" Ryan's expression softened. "Hey, kiddo." Tyla appeared beside her mother, blinking in confusion. "Dad." The word felt strange, coming out of her mouth, part memory, part disbelief. Nora hesitated, then unlatched the chain. "You can come in," she said tightly, "for a few minutes." He stepped inside, looking around like a man appraising real estate. "You've done well," he said. "This place, it's different. Guess things turned around, huh?" Nora crossed her arms. "We managed." "Yeah, I can see that. Ridgewood Academy, right? That's a fancy school. And you're working for that foundation." "Miles something, it's called the Miles Foundation," she said evenly. Ryan smiled knowingly. "Right, right." And the man behind it, Adrian Miles, the billionaire. He let the word linger like a provocation. "You must have impressed him." Nora's eyes narrowed. "Don't start Ryan. He helped because of Tyla, not me." Tyla looked between them uneasy. "Dad, how did you find us?" He shrugged. "World's smaller than you think. I just wanted to see my family again." Nora's voice dropped. "Family? You disappeared for 4 years. No calls, no letters, no child support." Ryan's smile faltered for the first time. "I made mistakes, okay, but people change. People like you don't change overnight," she said. For a moment, his charm cracked. "I'm still her father," he snapped, gesturing toward Tyla. "And I've got a right to see her." "That's not how rights work," Nora replied coldly. "Not after what you did." Before the tension could thicken, Tyla whispered, "Mom, it's okay. Maybe he really just wants to talk." Her voice trembled, and Nora felt her resolve waver. She'd raised Tyla to believe in second chances even when the world didn't deserve them. Ryan softened his tone again. "That's all I'm asking. A chance to talk." Nora relented. 1 hour. Public place. The next afternoon he met Tyla outside Ridgewood. She looked cautious but hopeful. He bought her ice cream, asked about her classes, told her she was smart like her mother. He laughed easily, but Tyla noticed the cracks, the way his hands trembled slightly when he reached for his coffee, the faint smell of cheap whiskey on his coat. Still, she wanted to believe. When she got home, Nora listened quietly as Tyla described the meeting. He said he's changed, the girl finished. He wants to be around more. Nora hid her concern behind a smile. We'll see, sweetheart. That night, after Tyla went to bed, Nora called Julian Cross. He's back, she said simply. Julian didn't sound surprised. Ryan Carter. We ran a background check after he started asking around. He's deep in debt, owes money to people you don't want knocking at your door. Nora's stomach dropped. So that's why he's here, most likely, Julian said. Adrian should know. The following morning in his office, Adrian listened quietly as Nora explained. His expression remained calm, but his jaw tightened. He's looking for money, he said flatly. He's looking for leverage, Nora corrected. He mentioned you. He knows who you are. Adrian exhaled, turning toward the window. We'll handle it. He's still her father, Nora said, almost defensively. I don't want this to turn into a spectacle. Adrian met her eyes. It won't, but you need to protect her. He's not here because of love, Nora. He's here because he sees value. A few days later, Ryan showed up again, this time uninvited. He waited outside Nora's workplace, catching her as she left. Don't walk away, he said quickly. I'm not the bad guy here. She turned sharply. You abandoned us. You don't get to rewrite that. I'm just asking for what's fair, he said. You and the girl are living good now, thanks to that rich guy. I'm not asking for much, just a little help to get back on my feet. That's not your money, she snapped. He lowered his voice. Maybe not. But if I file for shared custody, the court might see it differently, especially if it looks like this billionaire's been playing savior with another man's kid. Nora froze. You wouldn't. I would, he said, unless we can find an arrangement. She stared at him, realizing the trap he'd set. You're blackmailing me? Call it what you want, he said with a shrug. I just want my share. When she got home that night, Tyla was already there working on a science project. Nora watched her daughter's small hands carefully gluing paper to cardboard and felt her chest tighten. How could someone see this child, this kind, brilliant girl, and still think in terms of profit? Later, when Tyla asked softly, Mom, why are you crying? Nora forced a smile. I'm not, sweetheart, just tired. But she couldn't sleep. She knew Ryan's threats weren't empty, and the damage he could do publicly, legally, was real. For the first time since Adrian had entered their lives, Nora felt that fragile stability began to shake. Meanwhile, Ryan sat in his car, outside a downtown bar, scrolling through articles about Adrian Miles on his phone. Headlines about wealth, philanthropy, and influence filled the screen. Undercover Millionaire helps poor family one read. He grinned, pocketing the phone. Let's see how generous he really is. By the time the city lights flickered on, he'd already made his decision. He wasn't leaving Seattle not until he got what he came for. The courthouse loomed over downtown Seattle like a gray monument to judgment. Nora Carter gripped her daughter's hand as they climbed the stone steps, the sound of cameras clicking behind them. Reporters shouted questions about the billionaire benefactor, but Julian Cross moved smoothly between them, his voice steady. No comments, please. Let the court do its work. Tyla kept her head down, clutching her mother's arm. She'd never seen her father look so polished before. Hair slicked back, suit pressed a lawyer beside him who smiled like he'd already won. Inside, the air was cool and sterile. Rows of benches lined the room, half filled with curious onlookers. Judge Harper entered briskly, her black robe flowing behind her, and everyone rose. When she took her seat, her eyes swept over the courtroom, sharp but not unkind. We're here today to determine custodial rights regarding Tyla Carter, she said. Let's begin. Ryan's attorney, Mr. Slater, started with a tone soaked in false sincerity. Your Honor, my client isn't a perfect man, he said, pacing, but he's trying. Mr. Carter has faced hardships, yes, but who among us hasn't? He wants the chance to be a father again. Unfortunately, his ex-wife and her new benefactor, Mr. Adrian Miles, have built a wall between him and his child. He paused dramatically. A billionaire involving himself in another man's family, does that sound appropriate to you? Nora felt her face flush. She wanted to speak to correct him, but Julian placed a gentle hand on her wrist. "Wait," he whispered. "He's laying the stage. We'll take it apart piece by piece." Mr. Slater continued painting a picture of Ryan as a reformed man. He's secured temporary work, attends counseling, and only seeks shared custody, not money. He turned toward Nora and Adrian. "It's not about wealth, it's about love." When Julian rose to respond, the shift in the room was almost physical. His tone was quiet, deliberate, confident. "Your Honor," he began, "we're not here to punish mistakes, but we cannot ignore patterns. Mr. Carter didn't lose contact with his daughter by accident." He walked away. 4 years, no calls, no letters, no child support. Now that Nora Carter and Tyla are stable, he reappears, asking for fairness. Fairness, to whom he paused, then looked directly at the judge. "This case isn't about love. It's about leverage." He called Nora to the stand first. She testified simply with dignity. "I never wanted to shut Ryan out," she said. "I just stopped waiting for him to come back. When I was working double shifts, when Tyla had fevers, when the rent was late, he wasn't there." Mr. Slater stood for cross-examination, his tone oily but polite. "Mrs. Carter, you've recently taken a position at the Miles Foundation. Correct your employer." "Mr. Miles is sitting right there." "Yes," Nora replied. "And he also provides financial assistance for your daughter's schooling." "Yes, but, so it's fair to say your family's well-being now depends on this man." Julian objected instantly. "Irrelevant and misleading. Mr. Miles's assistance is philanthropic, not paternal." Judge Harper nodded. "Sustained. Mr. Slater, watch your framing." He smiled tightly and sat down. The implication, however, hung in the air like smoke. Next came Adrian Miles. He walked to the stand with calm precision, but Nora could see the tension in his jaw. Slater wasted no time. "Mr. Miles, you're a wealthy man. Why insert yourself into this family's private matters I didn't insert myself?" Adrian replied. "I was helped by a child who didn't know who I was. I chose to return that kindness." Slater arched a brow. Some would call that grooming loyalty. The courtroom stirred. Adrian's voice hardened. "Kindness doesn't require motive, counselor. Maybe that's hard for you to understand." Judge Harper rapped her gavel once. "Gentlemen, keep it civil." When Julian cross-examined Ryan, his tone was surgical. "Mr. Carter, you claim you want to rebuild your relationship with your daughter. Can you explain why you made no financial contributions for her care these past 4 years?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't in a position to help. And yet, Julian, continued records show you maintained a vehicle, spent money at casinos, and took several trips out of state during that same time." Ryan glared at him. "I'm trying to do better now." Julian nodded slowly. "Only after learning that your daughter's life had improved through Mr. Miles's support." Coincidence. Ryan's silence was answer enough. Then came the surprise witness. Julian rose. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Diana Porter." The doors opened, and a woman in a navy suit entered, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Ryan paled. "Objection," his lawyer hissed. "This witness wasn't disclosed. Overruled," Judge Harper said. "Proceed." Diana took the stand, her voice steady. "I dated Ryan Carter last year. When he found out his ex-wife was connected to a billionaire, he said, and I quote, 'I'm about to cash in on my kid's lucky break.'" The room fell silent. Ryan slammed his hand on the table. "She's lying." Judge Harper fixed him with a glare. "You'll sit down, Mr. Carter." Julian approached the bench calmly. "Your Honor, that statement aligns with recorded messages my office obtained voicemails where Mr. Carter discusses demanding money in exchange for dropping a custody claim." He placed a small flash drive on the table. "Submitted into evidence." Ryan's attorney looked deflated, whispering rapidly, but the damage was done. After hours of testimony, Judge Harper called a recess. Nora sat beside Tyla in the hallway, her daughter's small hand folded into hers. "It's almost over," she whispered, though her heart pounded in her chest. When court reconvened, the judge's expression was measured unreadable. "I've reviewed the testimony and evidence," she began. "Mr. Carter, I believe your interest in this case is motivated by financial gain, not paternal love. Your recent behavior undermines any claim of sincerity. Custody will remain solely with Mrs. Carter." Ryan slumped back his lawyer, already whispering about appeals he wouldn't be able to afford. The judge continued. "Furthermore, any contact with Tyla Carter will require court approval and counseling supervision. This court will not allow a child to be used as currency." Nora exhaled, trembling. Julian closed his folder with quiet finality. As they left the courthouse, the crowd waited again, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing. Tyla looked up at her mother, then at Adrian, walking beside them, steady as ever. "Does this mean it's really over?" she asked. Nora knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Yes, sweetheart, it's over." Adrian looked down at the girl whose single act of kindness had started it all. "Sometimes truth takes a fight," he said softly, "but it's always worth it." Tyla nodded, gripping his hand. Together they stepped through the courthouse doors into the bright Seattle afternoon, the first warmth of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Spring came early that year, the kind that washed away months of gray, and left the city smelling like rain and new beginnings. 2 years had passed since the trial, and Seattle had slowly become a place of peace for the Carters. Tyla was 12 now, taller, her confidence blooming with each day. The little girl who once dragged a cart of cardboard down Willow Street now stood behind a podium, her voice carrying across the crowded hall of Ridgewood Academy's auditorium. 2 years ago, she began, "I gave my last dollar to a stranger. I thought it was just a small thing, but it turned out to be the beginning of everything." Her voice wavered only slightly before finding its rhythm. "That moment didn't change our lives because of money. It changed us because kindness did what money never could. It connected people who had no reason to cross paths." The audience listened closely. Parents, teachers, city officials, reporters. In the front row sat her mother, Nora, dressed in her foundation blazer, eyes shining with pride. Beside her, Adrian Miles leaned forward, his expression calm but full of quiet admiration. His once restless spirit had softened. This, he realized, was what wealth was meant to do, not to build towers, but bridges. Behind, Tyla hung a banner, the Carter Miles Foundation for Family Support. What had started as a single scholarship had grown into a full initiative. Programs for single parents, after-school mentorships, grants for struggling families. Nora had risen through its ranks to become the executive director, though she never liked titles. "I just fix what I can," she'd tell the staff. As Tyla spoke, she scanned the crowd and spotted faces from every chapter of her life. Ms. Walker, her science teacher, Lila Bennett, waving excitedly from the second row. Even Mrs. Morales from the old apartment complex sitting near the back with a tearful smile. These were her people, her history woven into this new world. She continued. "When Mr. Miles helped us, he didn't just give us stability. He gave us a chance to give back. That's what this foundation is about, not charity, but community. Because sometimes all someone needs is a small act to believe again." Her words landed with a weight far beyond her years. When the applause began, it wasn't the polite kind, it was long heartfelt, the kind that left a lump in every throat. After the ceremony, the lobby buzzed with conversations. Reporters wanted quotes, donors wanted introductions, but Tyla slipped away to the courtyard, breathing in the crisp air. She turned when she heard footsteps behind her. "You handled that like a pro," Adrian said. Tyla smiled. "You think so, I know," so he said, leaning on the railing beside her. "You spoke from the heart. That's something money can't rehearse." She looked up at him. "Do you ever think about that day on Willow Street all the time?" he admitted. "That moment changed how I see everything. You gave me more than $1, Tyla. You gave me purpose." She laughed softly. "And you gave me a chance." He nodded. "That's how it works. One act passes to the next. It keeps going." Inside, Nora joined them, her expression relaxed in a way Adrian had rarely seen before. "I was proud of you both today," she said. "You've turned something simple into something lasting." Tyla grinned. "It's not over, Mom. This is just the start." Adrian looked at them, the mother and daughter whose courage had rebuilt his faith in people, and felt something he hadn't known he was missing. A sense of belonging. Not the kind written in legal papers or financial statements, but the quiet human kind that can't be bought or earned. Later that evening, the three of them stood together for a photograph. Nora's arm rested around Tyla's shoulders. Adrian stood slightly behind, one hand gently on Tyla's back. The photographer counted down 3, 2, 1, and the flash caught their smiles. That picture would later hang in the Foundation's main office, framed beneath the words, "Kindness creates change." Visitors often stopped to look at it, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the bay. Somewhere, life was still hard for another child, another family. But now, there was a place of foundation built from a girl's last dollar and a man's second chance, ready to reach out a hand. Before leaving that night, Tyla walked into Adrian's office where the framed dollar still sat on his desk. She studied it for a moment, then whispered, "Guess it really did change your life." Adrian looked up from his paperwork. "Ours," he corrected gently. "It changed ours." She smiled, and for the first time she understood exactly what he meant. The gift wasn't the dollar or the school or the foundation. It was the proof that one act of kindness could outlive the moment itself. And as she turned off the office light, that single crumpled bill gleamed faintly in the dark, a reminder of how something so small had built a legacy that would keep giving long after they were gone. In the end, the story of Tyla Carter wasn't really about money, fate, or even luck. It was about the quiet, unstoppable force of compassion. A 10-year-old girl with nothing gave away her only dollar to a man who seemed to have lost everything. That single selfless act became the spark that set an entire chain of transformation in motion. For Tyla, it opened doors she never imagined could exist. For her mother, Nora, it restored dignity and stability after years of exhaustion and struggle. And for Adrian Miles, the billionaire who thought he'd seen the world from every angle, it became the moment that gave meaning to a life filled with success but empty of connection. What started on a cold street in Seattle grew into something far greater. Adrian's wealth built foundations and programs, but it was Tyla's heart that gave them purpose. Nora's resilience turned a handout into opportunity, and together they built something that no amount of money could buy, a legacy of hope. The girl who once collected scraps now stood as a voice for families like hers, proving that compassion doesn't belong to the rich or the powerful. It belongs to anyone brave enough to act when no one else does. Their journey was never about perfection. It had pain, betrayal, doubt, and fear. Ryan Carter's return reminded everyone that kindness can be tested, manipulated, even used as a weapon. But it also showed that truth, when faced head-on, has its own kind of power. Through every courtroom argument, every sleepless night, and every tear shed, Tyla learned that real strength doesn't come from fighting alone, it comes from standing with those who believe in you. Years later, when the Carter Miles Foundation grew into a movement that touched thousands of families, people often asked Adrian how it all began. He would smile and point to the framed dollar on his desk. That, he'd say, is the most valuable investment I ever made. But he knew the truth. It wasn't the dollar that mattered, it was the courage behind it. And that's where the real lesson lies. In a world that often rewards greed over generosity, it's easy to believe small kindnesses don't matter. But they do. Every genuine act of compassion, no matter how small, plants a seed that can outgrow the harshest soil. Maybe it doesn't change the world overnight, but it changes someone's world. And sometimes that's enough to start everything else. We live in times where division, fear, and cynicism feel louder than kindness. Yet Tyla's story reminds us that hope isn't found in grand gestures, it's found in moments of quiet decency. It's the smile you offer a stranger, the meal you share, the small sacrifice that says, "I see you." That's how change begins, not in boardrooms or headlines, but in the hearts of people who still believe that one good deed can ripple outward endlessly. So as you leave this story, ask yourself, what can you give today? Not because you have plenty, but because you know what it's like to need. Maybe it's time, maybe it's forgiveness, maybe it's a single dollar. Whatever it is, give it freely. You never know whose life or whose heart it might transform. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that kindness still matters, then take a second to support our channel. Subscribe. Leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today. Because every view, every share, every message keeps this mission alive to tell stories that remind us of the good that still exists. And maybe, just maybe, inspire the next act of kindness that changes everything.